you're sitting in the dark. It's roughly 4,500 years ago, and you're somewhere in the ancient Near East, present-day Iraq, probably. The air smells like river clay and wood smoke, and something fermented that you genuinely cannot identify. Around you, the village is beginning to stir. And then, without planning, without ceremony, the person sleeping beside you presses their lips to your face. Not on the mouth, maybe. Maybe the forehead. Maybe the cheek. Maybe exactly where you'd expect. The point is, something happens in that moment that is entirely wordless, entirely instinctive, and entirely human. Or is it? That's the thing. We've always assumed kissing is universal. We've assumed it's just what humans do. Built-in, biological, ancient as fire. But the actual story of where kissing came from, what it meant, and whether your great-great-great-grandmother, 50,000 times removed, even recognized it as a behavior. That story is far stranger than any assumption you've been carrying around. So, did ancient humans kiss? The obvious answer is yes, obviously, of course they did. Kissing feels primal. It feels hardwired. You don't learn to want it. It just arrives. Animals do it. Bonobos do it. Even some fish press mouths in what looks uncomfortably like a kiss. Except the actual archaeological and anthropological record doesn't quite cooperate with that story. Because when researchers went looking for kissing across human history and human cultures, genuinely looking, cataloging, tracking it, what they found was that kissing as a romantic practice is not universal. It might not even be old, and the real origin of the kiss is something that starts somewhere much weirder than the mouth. Here's what nobody tells you. For most of human history, across most of human cultures, romantic mouth-to-mouth kissing either didn't exist or wasn't considered worth recording. And when researchers at the University of Nevada and Oxford published a landmark cross-cultural study in 2015, they found that only 46% of the 168 cultures they examined practiced romantic kissing at all. Not a majority, less than half, and the evidence for this is genuinely unsettling. The earliest direct written evidence we have for kissing comes from ancient South Asia. Vedic Sanskrit, texts from around 1500 BCE, specifically the Rig Veda and later the Atharva Veda, contain what appear to be descriptions of people pressing noses and mouths together in acts of affection. The Rig Veda describes sniffing contact, and scholars like Vaughn Bryant at Texas A&M University, who spent decades studying the archaeology of kissing, argue these early texts describe something transitional, somewhere between a nasal greeting and a lip contact gesture. But here's the part that tends to get skipped. Around 1800 BCE, cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia, specifically from sites excavated in what is now Iraq, including the ancient city of Nippur, contain references to kissing in both romantic and social contexts. Married couples kissed. People kissed gods in ritual acts. And what's fascinating is that the Mesopotamian concept of a kiss was not primarily about romance. It carried transactional weight. Kissing a superior's feet or hand was a gesture of submission. Kissing a deity's statue transferred your intention into the divine realm. The mouth was a conduit, not just an expression, not just affection, but a mechanism of social architecture. Which raises an uncomfortable question. What did the body know before the culture showed up to interpret it? The conventional story is that kissing evolved as a natural expression of intimacy, biologically encoded, cross-cultural, ancient. The story we tell about kissing is that it's like breathing, universal and involuntary. Except the 2015 study published in American Anthropologist by William Jankowiak, Shelley Volsha, and Justin Garcia at the Kinsey Institute doesn't quite work with that framing. When they cross-referenced ethnographic records from 168 societies, they found something striking. Romantic lip kissing was largely absent in sub-Saharan African cultures, New Guinea, and significant portions of indigenous North American societies. Not suppressed, not forbidden, just not there. Not a behavior that had emerged in that cultural context. And notably, some of the societies where it was absent had very robust traditions of affection, physical closeness, and sexual intimacy. They just didn't route any of that through the mouth. One researcher described it dryly. Some cultures, upon encountering kissing for the first time via contact with Europeans, reportedly found it disgusting. which, if you think about it from a first principles hygiene standpoint, is not an unreasonable response. What this suggests is something genuinely destabilizing. The romantic kiss may be a cultural invention that spread, like writing or agriculture, rather than a biological universal that simply exists. And if that's true, then what does it say about the things you feel most certain are just human nature? Here's where it gets biological, and this part is real. Kissing, when it does happen, triggers a genuinely complex cascade of neurochemical events. A 2013 study by Robin Dunbar at Oxford found that kissing frequency in relationships correlates with relationship satisfaction and stress reduction, but only when both partners assigned significance to it. Kissing, in other words, works because you believe it works. The oxytocin release, the dopamine spike, the cortisol drop, all of that is real, but it's activated by meaning, not by the mechanical act itself. There's also a compelling evolutionary hypothesis proposed by biological anthropologist Helen Fisher. The romantic kiss may have started as kiss feeding, the practice of mother-to-child pre-chewing of food, common in early hominins before cooking softened everything. The same mouth, the same proximity, the same chemical exchange. Evolution repurposed a nurturing behavior into an intimate one. Your most romantic gesture may have started as lunch delivery. Let that sink in. The neurochemical rush you feel when you kiss someone you love might be your ancient brain pattern, matching to a sensation wired for mother-infant bonding. The oldest love, inside the newest. The behavior doesn't stay human when you zoom out, which tells you something about its roots. Bonobos, our closest primate relatives alongside chimpanzees, kiss with open mouths in social reconciliation, after conflict, not just during intimacy. Elephants intertwine trunks in greeting. Fruit bats engage in prolonged oral contact that looks, by every functional definition, like kissing during mating. And across human cultures where kissing does exist, the variation is enormous. In Japan, public romantic kissing was historically taboo well into the 20th century. The first kiss scene in a Japanese film, in 1946, was described by some contemporary observers as scandalous. In the Malay tradition of cium, the kiss is a smell greeting, inhaling the scent of the other person's face rather than pressing lips. In some Andean communities, nose pressing remains a form of greeting that carries more emotional weight than anything involving the mouth. Even within Europe, the continent that arguably exported romantic kissing globally through colonization, the behavior was sharply constrained until, surprisingly recently. Medieval church texts from the 12th century spend considerable energy distinguishing between types of kisses and which were spiritually permissible. They weren't writing that down because kissing was natural and obvious. They were writing it down because it needed to be managed. Here's the uncomfortable part. If kissing is partly a cultural export, something that spread alongside empire, trade, and colonization, then the story of kissing is also a story about what one group of humans decided was normal and then made everyone else adopt. The global ubiquity of romantic kissing in contemporary life is not evidence that it's universal. It might be evidence of reach. There's something worth sitting with in the fact that when European explorers described encountering cultures without kissing in the 18th and 19th centuries, they often recorded it as evidence of emotional primitiveness. A lack of kissing became proof of a lack of feeling, which is a fascinating piece of motivated reasoning from people who were, in the same journals, describing the systematic dismantling of those societies. And then there's the thing, the Kinsey Institute. Data suggests quietly but unmistakably, the cultures with the highest rates of romantic kissing also tend to be the ones with the most commodified romantic culture, films, advertising, romantic love as a marketable aesthetic. You start to wonder whether the kiss, in its current global form, is ancient or manufactured. Whether you reach for it because your nervous system demands it, or because you've watched 10,000 people on screen reach for it first. The honest answer is we don't fully know when the first human kissed another human for reasons that had nothing to do with food, ritual, or submission. We probably never will. The body leaves few fossils, and meaning leaves none. But here's what the evidence does leave you with. That thing you do without thinking. The automatic pull toward closeness, toward scent, toward the particular warmth of another person's face. That impulse is older than culture. Even if the form it takes is not. Whether you press lips or foreheads or noses, the information being exchanged is the same. I know your chemistry. I'm close enough to read it. Whatever ancient computation decides what that means, that's still running. Right now, in you. You've been doing it longer than language. Longer than cities. Longer than any story anyone ever told about why we do it. The kiss might be invented. The reaching toward each other almost certainly isn't. And somewhere, a Mesopotamian person 4,000 years ago pressed their face against someone they loved. And whatever they felt in that moment, they didn't have a word for it either.